Frederick, Maryland. It lies just 50 miles northwest of Washington, D.C. To the untrained eye, it looks like a postcard of the American dream. Rolling green hills, quiet neighborhoods, and the peaceful rhythm of suburban life. But if you look closer, the illusion begins to crack. The open fields are suddenly cut off by heavy perimeter fences. Electrified barriers hum with lethal voltage. Armed patrols circle the grounds day and night. You are looking at the most heavily guarded biological laboratory in the United States.
This is Fort Detrick. To the locals, it is just a military base. But inside the intelligence community, it has earned a much darker nickname, the Devil's Kitchen. Behind these concrete walls, the government stores the deadliest substances known to man. Vials containing the power to wipe out entire civilizations sit in freezers just a few miles from elementary schools and family homes. For nearly 80 years, this facility has operated in the shadows, guarding secrets that are too dangerous to whisper.
It all started in 1943. The world was burning in the fires of the Second World War. The United States government needed an edge, a way to bring its enemies to their knees without firing a single bullet. They turned to George Merck, the head of the pharmaceutical giant Merck and Company. He was a man dedicated to saving lives, yet he was handed a terrifying new mission. The government appointed him to lead the War Research Service. His task was not to cure disease, but to weaponize it.
The official story was that Camp Detrick was created for defense. Its stated goal was to protect American troops and citizens from germ warfare. But documents declassified decades later reveal a different reality. Under Merck's command, the scientists here began developing methods to destroy the enemy's food supply. They engineered pathogens to rot crops in the fields and kill livestock by the thousands. The facility that was built to protect had quietly begun researching the most efficient ways to extinguish life. This brings us to the edge of a terrifying precipice. Over the next few minutes, we are going to unlock the archives of the Devil's Kitchen. We will expose the deals made with war criminals, the experiments on unsuspecting citizens, and the toxins that were never supposed to exist. But before we descend into the darkness, we must face one fundamental question. Where does legitimate science end? And where does a crime against humanity begin?
1945. The smoke over Hiroshima and Nagasaki has cleared. The Second World War is officially over, and the world is hungry for justice. In Europe, the Nuremberg trials are preparing to hang Nazi war criminals. The public expects the same ruthless efficiency in Tokyo. But behind closed doors, deep within the American occupation headquarters, a very different kind of negotiation is taking place. A conversation that will remain a state secret for decades.
General Douglas MacArthur and his intelligence officers are sitting across from a man who should be destined for the gallows. His name is General Shiro Ishii. He is the mastermind behind the infamous Unit 731. He is a man who turned human beings into laboratory rats on an industrial scale. But Ishii is not trembling. He is calm, because he knows he possesses something the United States Army is desperate to have.
Ishii places his cards on the table. He offers thousands of medical slides, detailed handwritten journals, complex pathology reports. These documents contain data that American scientists could never ethically obtain. They answered dark questions. Exactly how many minutes does it take for a human being to freeze to death? How does the bubonic plague destroy the human body when injected directly into the bloodstream?
The American government faces a critical choice: prosecution or progress, justice or supremacy. Between 1945 and 1947, They make their decision. They choose the darkness. In a secret deal that historians now call the ultimate moral collapse, the United States grants full immunity to Shiro Ishii and his team of butchers. Not a single scientist from Unit 731 is prosecuted. They walk free. In exchange, boxes filled with gruesome data are quietly shipped across the Pacific Ocean. Their destination is the rolling hills of Maryland, a facility known as Camp Detrick. This stolen knowledge, harvested from the suffering of thousands of victims, becomes the bedrock of the American biological weapons program. The foundation of modern biodefense was not built on innovation. It was built on a handshake with a monster.
By the 1950s, the shadows over Fort Detrick grew longer and much darker. The United States Army was no longer playing alone. The CIA had moved in, turning a corner of the base into a playground for their most twisted fantasies. This marked the birth of the infamous Project MK-Ultra. But the scientists here were not just looking for germs to destroy bodies anymore. They were engineering nightmares to break human minds. The goal was total control, and they needed guinea pigs. Sometimes those guinea pigs were their own colleagues. Let us go back to November 1953. A brilliant biochemist named Frank Olson is sitting at a semi-secret retreat in rural Maryland. He thinks he is sharing a quiet drink with his fellow scientists. He has no idea that his glass of Cointreau has been secretly spiked with a massive dose of military-grade LSD by the head of the project, Sidney Gottlieb. For the next few days, Olson descends into a paranoid, psychotic hell. He tells his superiors he wants out. He wants to resign. But in the world of black ops biology, you do not just hand in your 2 weeks' notice. 9 days after that drink, Frank Olson lay broken on the cold pavement of 7th Avenue in New York City. The official report said he jumped through a closed window on the 13th floor of the Hotel Statler, but the physics of the fall never added up. His family spent decades fighting for the truth, convinced he was silenced because he knew too much about the terminal interrogations the CIA was conducting in Europe. If you are hooked on uncovering the history they tried to erase, make sure you hit that subscribe button right now, because the rabbit hole only gets deeper from here. Imagine believing you are serving your country by saving lives, only to become a living vessel for disease. By 1954, the scientists at Fort Detrick faced a problem. They had moved past animal testing and needed to know how biological agents affected the human body. Enter Operation Whitecoat. Over the next 2 decades, more than 2,200 volunteers, primarily Seventh-day Adventists, walked through the gates. These were conscientious objectors, men who refused to carry a gun or kill in combat, yet they agreed to let the Army inject them with Q fever and other pathogens to test experimental vaccines. They were promised safety, but they were the raw material for a new kind of warfare.
While the volunteers in Operation Whitecoat gave consent, the rest of America did not. The ambition of Fort Detrick could not be contained within laboratory walls. The military needed to know how a biological cloud would behave in a real metropolis. In late September 1950, a U.S. Navy vessel off the coast of California quietly released a massive cloud of Serratia marchescens, a bacteria chosen because it turns red, making it easy to track. The fog rolled into San Francisco, carrying the bacteria into the lungs of 800,000 unsuspecting citizens. The military successfully proved that a coastal city could be blanketed with a biological agent within hours.
But this was not a harmless simulation.
Serratia marcescens was supposed to be safe, but shortly after the test, local hospitals saw a sudden, inexplicable spike in rare urinary tract infections and pneumonia. One resident, Edward Nevin, a recovering patient, succumbed to the infection and died. His family would not learn the truth about the source of the bacteria for decades. The government had turned an iconic American city into a massive involuntary petri dish, proving that in the eyes of the biological warfare program, the distinction between a soldier and a civilian had completely evaporated.
By 1969, the pressure was mounting. President Richard Nixon officially renounced the use of offensive biological weapons. It seemed like the end of an era. Fort Detrick was rebranded, shifting its stated mission strictly to defense and medical research. However, experts argue this created a dangerous gray zone. To build a shield against the virus, you must first build the virus. To create an antidote, you must possess the poison. The offensive programs officially vanished, but the stockpiles of deadly toxins and the knowledge of how to weaponize them remained locked in the freezers, waiting for a key that never truly got thrown away.
September 11th, 2001, shattered the illusion of safety. But while the smoke was still rising from Ground Zero, a silent, invisible killer began traveling through the United States mail system. Letters containing a fine white powder arrived at major news outlets and Senate offices. 5 people died, 17 were sickened. Panic paralyzed the nation. But the true horror wasn't in the letters themselves. It was in the microscope.
Genetic fingerprinting revealed a terrifying truth. This wasn't crude battlefield anthrax made in a cave abroad. It was the Ames strain, highly refined, weaponized to float in the air like a ghost, and it had a specific return address, genetically speaking. It matched the samples kept in the heavily guarded freezers of Building 1425 at Fort Detrick. The terror didn't come from overseas. It came from the heart of the American biological defense complex.
The hunt for the anthrax killer turned inward, targeting the very scientists hired to protect the country. For years, the FBI chased wrong leads, destroying reputations, until their gaze settled on Dr. Bruce Ivins. He was a brilliant microbiologist, a Red Cross volunteer, and a 28-year veteran of the fort. Ironically, he was the very expert who had been helping the FBI analyze the attack samples.
The investigation became psychological warfare. Agents painted a picture of a mentally unstable man working late nights alone in the hot suites, driven by a twisted desire to test the efficacy of his own anthrax vaccines. They followed him and harassed his family. In July 2008, just as prosecutors prepared to charge him with capital murder, Ivins took a massive overdose of acetaminophen. He died, taking his secrets to the grave.
The Department of Justice declared the case solved upon his death, but this is where the official story cracks, leaving room for a chilling alternative reality. Many of Ivins's colleagues insisted he was innocent. They pointed out that he lacked the specialized equipment to turn wet anthrax into the dry floating spores found in the letters. They argued he was the perfect Lee Harvey Oswald for a biological age, a convenient scapegoat to close the most expensive investigation in FBI history.
If the skeptics are right, the conclusion is far darker than any government report. It implies that the true architect of the attacks, someone with high-level security clearance, military-grade skills, and access to the deadliest pathogens on Earth, was never caught. While the file on Bruce Ivins gathers dust, the real enemy within might have simply walked away, leaving the back door to the lab unlocked. Imagine it is July of 2019, a sweltering summer in Maryland.
Inside the most secure biological facility on Earth, operations grind to a sudden, jarring halt. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC, issues a rare cease and desist order to Fort Detrick. They immediately shut down the biosafety level 3 and 4 laboratories. These are the rooms housing the deadliest pathogens known to man, the ones for which there is no cure. The official explanation given to the press was bureaucratic and vague. They cited violations in the steam sterilization plants and a failure in the wastewater decontamination system. Basically, the mechanism meant to ensure that nothing dangerous escaped into the sewage system had failed. To the locals in Frederick, Maryland, this was terrifying news. They already live in the shadow of the so-called cancer cluster, caused by decades of forgotten burials where toxic waste from the Cold War leached into the groundwater. So when the Army admits to a leak in 2019, panic is the only logical reaction.
But here is where the timeline gets incredibly dark. Just weeks after the labs go dark in July, emergency rooms across the United States start filling up with a mysterious respiratory condition. Doctors are baffled. Young, healthy people are gasping for air, their lungs appearing like shattered glass on X-rays. The medical community names it EVALI and blames it entirely on illicit vaping cartridges. While vaping was certainly a factor, the symptoms, fever, extreme fatigue, dry cough, and sudden pneumonia, feel hauntingly familiar to anyone who lived through what came next.
Conspiracy theorists and foreign media outlets began connecting dots that the United States government desperately wanted to keep separate. The theory goes like this. The fort shuts down in July due to a containment breach. A strange pneumonia spreads through Maryland and Virginia in August, dismissed as the vaping sickness. Then, in October of 2019, hundreds of American military athletes travel from the United States to Wuhan, China, for the Military World Games.
Did a biological agent escape the filters of Fort Detrick, travel silently through the local population, and then hop on a plane to central China? This hypothesis suggests that the patient zero of the global pandemic was not in a wet market in Wuhan, but right here on American soil, perhaps unaware they were carrying a microscopic time bomb. If you want to uncover more stories that the history books try to hide, go ahead and hit that subscribe button right now. We are just scratching the surface.
To this day, the full details of the safety breaches that led to the closure in 2019 remain redacted for reasons of national security. We are left with a coincidence that defies the odds. A catastrophic failure at a germ warfare lab, a mysterious lung disease outbreak next door, and a global pandemic, all within a span of 5 months. Whether it was bad plumbing or a biological escape, the summer of 2019 at Fort Detrick remains one of the biggest unanswered questions of the 21st century. Imagine a timeline where the silence was broken. It is July 2019. It is a humid afternoon in Maryland. In our reality, the labs at Fort Detrick were quietly issued a cease and desist order by the CDC due to safety violations with their wastewater decontamination system. But in this alternate reality, the sirens begin to wail. A code red flashes across every screen in the Pentagon. The containment breach is not hidden behind redacted documents. Within the first hour, the president is forced to authorize Protocol Clean Water. By sunset, the city of Frederick is not wondering about a strange news report. They are being loaded onto military trucks. The National Guard descends, establishing a hard quarantine zone with a 50-mile radius. Soldiers in full hazmat gear are not testing the sewers, they're sealing the perimeter with concrete barriers.
The government immediately admits that dangerous pathogens from the Level 4 biosafety labs have entered the municipal water supply. There is no cover-up, only panic.
Here is where history violently pivots. In our timeline, doctors were baffled by a sudden spike in mysterious lung injuries among young people, labeling it the vaping sickness or EVALI. In this alternate reality, with the spotlight burning on Maryland, military virologists make the connection instantly. They announce that the patients filling up hospitals near the base are not suffering from chemical cigarettes. They are identified as patient zeros for a novel, highly contagious coronavirus that leaked from the base's aging infrastructure.
The borders are closed, not by the United States, but against the United States. Canada and Mexico seal their crossings. Europe and Asia ban all American flights immediately. The quarantine is ruthless. Because of this total isolation, the virus never reaches a wet market in Wuhan. There is no global lockdown in 2020. The economy does not crash. Millions of lives are saved worldwide. But the geopolitical cost is paid solely by American prestige. The reputation of the superpower collapses overnight.
The aftermath is biblical. The previously ignored reports about forgotten toxic waste burials and the cancer clusters in the surrounding counties are excavated on live international television. The United Nations demands total oversight. A new tribunal sits in The Hague, labeled the New Nuremberg, trying top generals and scientists for gross negligence and crimes against public safety. And finally, the world watches the closing scene of this drama. The controlled demolition of Fort Detrick. The concrete towers crumble into dust, burying 70 years of secrets, from the dark deals with Unit 731 to the anthrax letters. The world is safe, but the American century ends in a cloud of demolition smoke.